Hey everybody, welcome to the Quick Draw with the Owner Young Guns. I am your host, Mike, the mean Mormon with a mouth, and with me is my mild-mannered alter ego, John.
I'm not mild-mannered. What are you talking about?
You're not. I like how that's what you dispute, not the alter ego thing.
No, that part's good.
Like, yes, when I want to pretend to be a nice guy, I pretend to be a very mild-mannered black man.
There you go.
Named at Kemari Hidioku, because
see, the problem is that I'm not a black man, at least not according.
I love how when we argue with liberals, they never assume I'm a black guy. They always assume you're a white guy.
Exactly.
It's like it never works in reverse. So,
but
liberals are fun.
There's that third person on the.
Yeah. Anyway, so yeah, we're going to have a fun topic tonight. We're going to be talking about free speech, guys, because, it's not going to be long before we don't even get that anymore on this channel. With us to discuss this is the very bright, very talented Eric Shaffer.
Hey, guys, thanks for having me.
Hey, thanks for being here, man. So where do you want to start, Eric? Because there's so much fun we can have with this tonight. I don't really know where to begin.
I want to start with I feel bad that he got convicted, but I wanted to start with the more lighthearted Count Dankula thing before we got into Kevin Williamson.
Oh,
that's lighthearted.
I should have brought my dog onto the show. Maybe we can teach him to Zig Heil tonight.
Let's not say we did.
That's really a bad state of affairs when he's the lighthearted case.
Right?
We've convicted you of telling a joke, but there are worse things going on in the world.
They actually, in that prosecution, they actually tried to up the sentencing to like 5 years. There was like a point in the trial where the prosecutors tried to get, so usually the crime that he's being charged for, I don't know if he's actually going to go to jail or not, but like the jail time sentence is like 1 year. And the prosecution tried to get the crime that he was being charged for like upped. So then the minimum jail time would be like 5 years. So it's insane the amount of effort they put into trying to bag this guy and put him in jail for a Nazi joke.
Just, I swear the Scottish have come a long way, I guess, on this one, where they were apparently a very backwards people. Then they managed to catch up with the world, and now they're just throwing that all away. Just right in the garbage. Just why not? Let's convict people for telling jokes.
The funny thing is I didn't even know who this guy was until they're threatening to throw him in jail. So if they're like worried about like this becoming, we've got to stamp this out before it becomes a thing, and then everybody's teaching their dog how to Zig Heil. I'm like, well, I didn't know who this guy was until like a week ago, and I had no desire to teach my dog how to Zig Heil until like 5 minutes ago. So,
like now,
good job, Scotland Yard. Good job. Mission accomplished.
And
oh, sorry, man. I just wanted to say, I think the problem, too, is like the reason this case has gained so much traction in the media isn't just that this guy's being sentenced for a joke. It's that when he talks to the media and everything, from what I've heard of him, he sounds like just a really reasonable dude. Like, I was joking around. Why am I being sentenced to possible jail time? Like, this is absolutely absurd.
Right. Can you imagine the conversation like in his jail cell? So what are you in for? Yeah, man, I cut a guy's throat in a bar fight. What are you in for? I told a joke. You were funny, man. You joking with me right now?
He is the epitome of a shitlord. That's what he is. I mean, it's the guy who, if he sees a way to tell just an incredibly, because again, was the joke funny? It depends on who you're talking to.
It's one of those jokes where you laugh because you're kind of shocked. Like you're just
right.
Like,
yeah.
I'm like,
did he really just do that?
It's like abortion jokes or babies on spikes jokes. Like you laugh because you don't want to be the asshole that's like, that's not funny, guys.
Right.
But in your head, you're going like, that's not really
funny.
funny. That's not really that funny. But okay,
yeah.
I'll laugh. Whatever.
Like me, I'm a fan of dark humor. Like I don't know why. It's I guess I'm a morbid person, but I just absolutely love dark humor. But it's like looking at that. But it's like, and I think Philip DeFranco brought up the best point about this. Is like the court was saying that, oh my God, how could you say such hateful things? I don't get how you could see this as a joke. And Philip DeFranco brought up that literally at the beginning of the video, before he like goes about showing what he's done to this dog, that he was annoyed that his girlfriend was touting it as the cutest, most innocent thing ever, and he wanted to ruin it. So he openly acknowledges the Nazi.
So now that's funny.
Right.
That's actually hilarious.
And he openly acknowledges that Nazism is bad and that Nazism ruins nice things. I don't get how you can watch that video and say, well, he's a Nazi.
Well, don't you know, Eric, how do we know you're not a Nazi? I mean, honestly, you could very well be. I mean, you're white, you got the glasses and the kind of the, I mean, you got the, are you sure you're not, are you a Mormon?
Blonde hair?
Well, yeah, blonde hair, blue eyes. I mean, you guys never know. No, but I'm not.
Just to be clear.
Don't want someone finding this clip later and like, Eric Shaffer, does he think he's a Nazi? Well, you never know. Like that just
right. I could be. You don't know for sure, not do you? And again, that is really the absurdity of it all. Is the idea that basically Nazi at this point is it's like the more words seem to be going to that point where they don't mean anything anymore, like racist did during like every single year of the Obama administration, where everyone's a racist, so therefore apparently so was I, which is weird because I'm told that, well, no, that's what it is. It's convoluted because black people can't be racist, but I'm not black, so you can see how that works. But you know, everyone's a racist.
How many Jewish people do we know on Twitter that get called like Nazi
sympathizers?
And he's just like
all of them.
It's like. How does that work? So yeah, I'm kind of surprised that I have a feeling it's going to play out exactly like the Hank Reardon trial in Atlas Shrugged. Like they're going to find him guilty. They're going to slap like a 10-year sentence on him, and they're going to be like, because we're such nice guys, and because you contributed to the dialogue, and because you've been so cooperative, we're going to suspend your sentence. So you're guilty, but you don't have to go to jail. And then, so they're gonna save face that way. There's no way you throw a guy into jail for a joke and not have, especially after Brexit. Like I'm kind of curious how this impacts like the whole Brexit mentality, because people were saying, see, look, Brexit was a bad idea, and now people are like, well. I mean, we did the Brexit thing because we wanted to get away from this kind of idiocy. So now
they just brought it home.
I'm thinking now they're just gonna like double down and be like, okay, now we need to kick Scotland out of the UK.
They realize there's no winning this, right? Because in truth, Scotland is stuck now. They painted themselves into a corner. They can't actually. I think
it's going to end like the trial scene in Atlas Shrugged. They're just going to be like.
Because most likely,
shit, we need an example, not a martyr.
Yeah, most likely they're going to throw a big sentence at him, then commute it. But we're not stupid. We understand that that's just a play at trying to say, I'm benevolent. I could have put you in jail for 10 years, but I'm not. And it's like, and on the other hand, if they do it, then that just makes it worse. There's no winning. There's nothing they can do. What are they supposed to do to not be seen for what they are? The fact of the matter is, the fact that you arrested the guy at all, the fact that you put him on trial at all, the fact that you convicted him at all tells you that already you're a bunch of just complete pieces of shit. You already decided to do all this. You can't back out now. You can't. You really can't. And
I love too how the people in America that claim to be anti-fascist and are anti-Trump because they're anti-fascist are the people that are supporting this. They're like, no, throw the book at him. He gets what he deserves. That was hateful. Right. That was mean. That was grossly offensive. And besides, they have laws, and that's what laws are for. I'm like, that's fascism, guys. I thought you hated that. I thought we hated fascism. I thought fascism was bad, and we didn't want it. Like now fascism's cool. Okay, I can't. Well,
what I think this says about Europe is that. Listen, we always hear that the West is this bastion of democracy. They're this beacon of freedom in a dark world. I mean, that's America at this point. The West is America. Europe is not free. Europe hasn't been free for a very long time. And when you have, it may have been Scotland, but I think it was Ireland. Basically, the Ireland, like this police force in Ireland, was tweeting out stuff against hate speech, and not just against hate speech, but saying that people who promote or promulgate hate speech can be thrown in jail. They can be charged for their crimes. When you have countries like Britain,
be greater than a hater.
Yeah, exactly. When you have
God.
countries like Scotland, like Britain, like Germany, and I don't know all the hate speech laws in all of these countries, but I can guarantee you not one of them guarantees the right to free speech. And I can guarantee you almost all of them have some sort of laws against some sort of speech. I hate. I think you're a Nazi is vile. I don't think you should be charged for it. But the fact of the matter is, when Europe engages in these tendencies of, well, we're going to charge you for your words, it shows that Europe is no longer the beacon of democracy and hope that it once was. It's just not. It isn't a bastion of freedom anymore. And you can even see this in this trial. Like when this, I think his real name's like Meekin or something, but like when Count Dankula's attorney was defending him, she had two primary defenses. The first one was that, oh, it was just a joke. The second one was, well, he never expected it to go viral. Those were the two main defenses. And you never hear in those defenses, well, he has an inherent right to free speech, because that just isn't a value in those countries. Nope. And so if you are a country...
That's so bizarre to me. And I was having this debate earlier on Twitter, because now the left has, especially with the Kevin Williamson thing, right? The left all of a sudden loves freedom of association and private property rights and being able to do business with whomever you want or don't want to do business with. It's amazing. Like when you had to bake a cake, that was non-negotiable.
Yeah, absolutely.
But when it comes to like a guy who, has a very extreme opinion and punishing women, if you break down Kevin Williams' opinion about punishing women for murders, I don't agree with it personally. I'm a bit more of a pragmatist when it comes to how you handle the abortion debate. I still think abortion should be illegal, but I think I side with most people when I say who think it should be illegal that, punish the people that are actually killing the child. Don't punish the woman. I mean, she's already going through a traumatic event. Yeah. So, but if you break down his views on capital punishment, if you break down his views on what abortion is, which is it's murder, okay. It's not that strange an idea once you understand the fundamental premises. It's only strange to individuals who don't acknowledge that abortion is murder or don't acknowledge that people should be killed for capital offenses. Like that's where it's strange. But it's not like he's not really that extreme. And even if you want to argue that it's extreme, it's amazing to me that, oh no, we can't do business with this guy because he just has some weird, wacky views. But the Christian baker who says, yeah, you guys have a weird, wacky lifestyle and I don't want to bake a cake celebrating it. Bake that fucking cake.
Yeah, but I love the left is both amusing and irritating in the same sense, because on the one, I'm remembering the case in Canada where there was a Muslim barber that wouldn't give a haircut to a lesbian and they were like paralyzed with indecision. But the other thing is, there is nothing that pisses me off more than people who do something that cause a problem and then insist they have no idea why. There was actually the Babylon Bee. It's basically a Christian version of the Onion. And basically they had the article talking about
it's actually fun.
Leftists perplexed. Yeah, leftists perplexed about why it is that, why is the country so polarized? By the way, if you disagree with me, I may want to kill you. But I can't understand why. Why is there so much? It's like with the Second Amendment, where they say, we're not coming for your guns. We're only holding up signs that say repeal the Second Amendment. We have articles from a retired Supreme Court justice that says repeal the Second Amendment. No, we're not coming for what are you talking about? I don't know what you mean by that. And, it's the same thing with the speech. What? No, we're not trying to. Why is all this? Why can't we get along? Yeah, David Hogg is
and that's the thing that boggles my mind is they are now trying to hide behind freedom of association and saying, look, and they're saying what conservatives have said for years, which is, look, the First Amendment only restricts the government, right? It only stops the government from passing laws against speech. It only stops the government from silencing you. And that's true. But there's still a principle of free speech here, right? And if the Atlantic was exercising their right to association, well, they wouldn't have hired the guy, right? This wasn't a situation where they're like, we don't want to do business with this guy. He doesn't represent our values, and we have a certain clientele or readership that we try to cater to, and I don't think he's going to cater to that audience. That'd be one thing. That's not what happened here. What happened is they said, hey, we're going to hire this guy because, we want to have divergent views, and he's a bit of a firebrand. He's going to make people think. He's going to say things that are going to get people riled up, and we want that because clickbait. And then the left-wing mob came with their pitchforks and torches and said, you need to fire this guy or we're going to burn you to the fucking ground. And they're like, oh.
Get that guy. He did it.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it wasn't me. It was him. I swear.
Well,
get him.
This is the thing about Williamson, though. He's like been known to push the envelope of arguments. Like all of his pieces push the envelope of arguments. And a lot of people on the left in particular, and by the way, I don't agree with Williamson's it's a hard name to pronounce right now. His sentiments.
Is it really?
I get tongue twisted. Well, I don't agree with his sentiments totally on the issue. He actually had a speech, and a lot of the left is ignoring the speech. He had a speech at Hillsdale College where he further addressed these comments on Twitter and these comments in his podcast. And he's like, well, I had someone come up to me and ask me if I actually advocated hanging all women who had abortions. And I also read a piece in National Review on this as well. He's like, one, I don't support ex post facto punishment. So if, like, say we pass a law treating abortion as capital punishment, I don't believe anyone in the past that has had an abortion or has advocated for it or who has performed it should be punished. The second thing is, and this was in the National Review article that I was reading, acting as if Kevin Williamson, when he says, I want abortion to be treated as capital punishment, he thinks that this quarter of the population of women who's had abortions are still going to have an abortions, and thus he wants to hang them all. Like, that's absolutely ridiculous. One of the reasons he apparently wants that is as a deterrent from getting an abortion. Right. So, I mean,
that's why any of us want abortion to be illegal. We want the abortions to stop. So what do? You say, look, if you have an abortion, there's going to be penalties.
Some kind of punishment. Yeah. Kind of,
And while I don't agree with the sentiment of the punishment, I can't say, you cannot tell me in good faith that Williamson is advocating for hanging and genociding a quarter of the population. That's just not a logical response. And the fact is, had Williamson not ever said these things to begin with, he's such a fringe writer, like he pushes arguments to their fringe, they would have found something else to be outraged about anyways. This wasn't about the specific abortion points he was bringing up. This is about them not liking having to read another opinion, especially because Williamson isn't some right-wing hack who goes easy on moderate liberals, who goes easy on conservatives who go against their principles. He will call you out, and he's very elegant at doing so, and they just don't want to hear that.
And let's be honest. Kevin Williamson is not exactly the best example of what the left can't tolerate, because he's like you said, he pushes the envelope to the right. But the reality is, it doesn't matter. They can be leftists. They won't like them. Again, old example, but Juan Williams. Remember with Juan Williams, NPR fired him. Why? Because first of all, they were looking for a reason, because he works for Fox News at all. It doesn't matter what he's doing.
It doesn't matter he's the token liberal.
Right. Never mind that. The point is, they're like, how dare he? And then when he says, and then they were like, when he said that one thing that, let's be honest, everyone is thinking, where he's like, oh, well, if I see a bunch of Muslims praying in an airport, then I get nervous, getting on a plane. Yeah, he does. Yeah, so do I.
Even about 60% of the rest of the population.
Right. And they're like, we've got our reason to fire him. But let's be realistic. They hated him from the start.
That's interesting, because I wonder if the whole strategy behind that, if there is a strategy, I wonder if the strategy behind that is we've got to get rid of liberals that talk to conservatives. Like, we've got to shut them down, because we don't want conservatives to have this perception or this air of objectivity and fairness and balance. Because remember, that was a big thing with Fox News back in the day, like fair and balanced. Like we accept liberal views, and it's not like CNN where you have a token conservative who's more like a moderate and who doesn't really fight for conservative values. He's just there so CNN can pretend to be balanced. They actually put hardcore liberals. They put Juan Williams and Bob Beckel and other people,
right?
And that's when Fox News was at its zenith, right? Like, Fox News, when it was actually like a worthwhile news organization to watch, had great arguments between fiery liberals. And you watched, And yes, it was red meat, but that's why you watched. You watched to watch Bob Beckel like lose his shit with Hannity. And you didn't like either of them, but man, what a fight. That was awesome.
Right.
Like,
can we laugh at the fact that Hannity was more relevant at the time when Combs was on his show than after?
I mean, I can't stand watching Fox News anymore for this very reason. They and it's kind of not Fox News' fault. They let the left push out their liberals and silence their liberals. So now Fox becomes this very right-wing, very extreme viewpoint, and they kind of fulfill the left's caricature of right-wing news, and then they just kind of went with it. And something that you bring up, Eric, that I kind of wonder, like, there used to be a time when if you were conservative, right? And John and I have always believed this for a very long time, and we're kind of shifting our views lately. At least I am. I don't know about you, John, but it used to be you moderated your views. Even if you were like a far right, you were an Ayn Randian, uber religious social conservative, like just this caricature of from the left. You still knew better. Right, you moderated your views, because the last thing especially if you wanted to be famous or be a pundit or go into politics, because you didn't want to give the left fuel, right? Yeah. You didn't want to do what Kevin Williamson did, which is give them something, anything to silence you or ostracize you from the discussion. Now it's like, even if you check yourself, if there's nothing you can do, like you might as well be a shit poster who teaches your pug how to sing Heil, because there's no making anybody happy. Like, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, listen, I don't think you should suppress your actual political views, because often what suppressing your political views leads to is just not good things. When you feel repressed in the culture, it often leads to extremism. It doesn't just lead to you becoming a caricature. It doesn't just lead to you, feeling sad that you can't really express yourself. It leads to extremism. And you can see that kind of in Europe. So I hate to go back to Europe, but it's kind of this theory I've had about the pendulum effect in Europe. And I'll specifically look at Germany, because Germany really is the best example. Yep. So for a long time in their history, what happened in Germany was, like, imagine a pendulum. The pendulum was building up and up and up and up and up to the right. You had the Weimar Republic, you had, Bismarck, and then eventually you got so far up to the right where you had a fascist like Hitler. And again, this is European right-wingism. Right. Now, Hitler was deposed, and you saw throughout the Cold War, and especially right now, the pendulum is starting to swing back over to the left. And now, as you see until recently, how she's been talking about the refugee crisis overall with Angela Merkel, you've seen suppression of free speech. You've seen prominent left-wing opinions in culture. You've seen that Nazism isn't just frowned upon, as it should be, but it is actively suppressed in society. Like, if you have Nazi memorabilia, they will come to your house and arrest you. This leads to a suppression and not just Nazism, but if you are just slightly right-wing, they attribute that to Nazism. So now what you've seen is a bunch of repressed right-wingers all of a sudden coming out as these nationalists, all of a sudden is coming out as these new neo-Nazis. And you've seen a spike of neo-Nazism in Germany specifically. And now you kind of see the pendulum starting to swing back. So what happens, what makes that pendulum swing up to begin with, is when you have one side of the political aisle not only dominating the culture, but they dominate it in such a sense that they suppress the other side. That's what's really dangerous. And that's kind of my fear for America, is you've seen the pendulum starting to swing up and up and up and up and up with the left, suppressing the right, suppressing actual sensible right-wing opinions. I'm worried that as the right is suppressed, the left is going to build up to such an extent that now you have nationalists, now you have European-style right-wingists, you have populists, you have people resembling the Nazi movement. I'm not saying that you see that right now, but I'm saying that's a possibility in the future if we don't fix this. So conservatives should break free of being that caricature. They should feel comfortable with their political views. They should feel comfortable expressing their political views and be willing to combat leftist ideology. Otherwise, that pendulum, it's going to be all the way up here, and in a generation or two, you're going to see it swing all the way over here, just as it has throughout history and various civilizations. And it's a really kind of scary prospect.
I absolutely agree with that. Let me rephrase what I was trying to say. I'm not saying you should hide or suppress what you believe. Like if you have a very strong belief about anything in politics or religion or what have you, absolutely you should express that belief. What I mean when I say you moderate your belief, I mean, if you have an opinion on abortion, right, and you want to share that opinion, it used to be, especially if you were conservative, you had to check that opinion in terms of like, okay, do I really believe that? Okay, have I thought this through? Like, can I defend this? And if I can't defend this, maybe I need to rethink this. Or if it's, the pressure that conservatives have always been under, because we are culturally a minority. Numerically, we're a majority. America is still a right of center nation, but politically and in terms of our cultural institutions, I think we're a bit of a minority. There's a lot of pressure in media and in academia to kind of make sure that if we're going to take a far right view, that we can defend it intellectually, that we can actually make the points, consider the logic, take it to its logical conclusion, and argue eloquently. And so now it's like we don't even have, like, there's no incentive, I think, to be eloquent. There's no incentive to be intelligent. It's like you said, that pendulum that's the real danger, I think, of that pendulum, is not that it swings people to more and more extremes, although that's a danger too. It's that we stop being critical thinkers. We stop thinking about, okay, why is abortion bad for us? Are we just against abortion because we're Republican, or because we're right wing, or because we're conservative, and that's what conservatives do? That's not a good reason to be abortion. Are we against abortion just to own the left? Well, that's not a good reason to be against abortion. How about we be against abortion because it's fucking murder? Like, it's you're ending an innocent human life. Like it's basically Roe v. Wade is the Dred Scott decision of our time. That's the argument that we should make. That's the eloquent argument. It is, to our generation, what chattel slavery was to antebellum America. Like, those are the comparisons we should be making. Nobody wants to make them because it's hard. Like, you can't, and there's no incentive. Like, why come up with intelligent, logical, painstakingly thought out ideas if the people you're trying to persuade are just going to say, ha, fuck you, we're going to silence you? Like,
okay, so so when you said moderate, I thought like actually make yourself seem more moderate than when you actually were. So in this case, when you talk about moderating your opinions in the sense that making sure you can actually eloquently talk about it, and now that there's no incentive with, people just not even taking the eloquent argument seriously, you have to understand that, let's say I get into a debate with someone and I'm debating in front of an argument. We actually just did this recently at UNCW, myself and Elise Yost. We're the president and I'm the administrative vice president of the UNCW College Republicans. We had a very civil debate with the UNCW College Democrats on campus. But even if it were uncivil, the point of the debate wasn't convincing the UNCW College Democrats to come over on, it was about gun control, to come over to our side on to come over to our side on gun control. No, the point was to convince the audience. And the problem with not, I guess, moderating yourself in this sense and making sure you can properly argue an issue is, sure, if you engage in this, it builds up tribalism. So if you engage in, wow, you're just a cuck for not being pro-life, blah, blah, blah. I mean, you get your tribe, you get the people who share your tribal sentiment all like hopped up. But at the end of the day, the people who are on the fence are either going to remain on the fence, or if the other side just engages you more civilly or seems more logical, which if you're calling someone a cuck or you're just like engaging in this tribalist rhetoric, they likely will see the other side as more logical, then maybe they shift over to the left. The point isn't convincing the person you're debating with, it's convincing the audience, and to the point where you get a majority of people out there who say, you know what, abortion is murder. And I think that both taking into account, natural rights and taking into account the biology of the situation, I just don't feel comfortable with it. So we should legislate against it. That's what you want. Logical and coherent arguments are not for the person you're debating against. They are for the audience specifically.
Yes. Thank you. That's exactly what we've said for years. Thank you.
And I should also point out that what you said about Europe is important here too, because you brought up Germany, and that's important because Germany had, basically a situation where again, with the whole migrant thing, you have a lot of people coming, and you end up with all the rapes happening and stuff like that. It's actually disconcerting because, just like with France, when the only people who care that your own people are getting raped are racists, you tend to tolerate their racism if you can stop the rapes. You know?
Exactly.
And so right now, in a lot of Europe, the only people saying, you know, our own people getting raped is kind of a bad thing are the racists. And it's ironic. At that point, you're kind of saying, okay, look, because a lot of people are betting on the idea that, okay, we'll deal with the racism later. Right now, right now, we'll deal with the racism. Right now, we need to quit with the rapes. We need to stop the stuff that's going on. The only people willing to deal with it are racists. But you know what? Fuck it. We'll just deal with it because honestly, we just need to stop the damn rapes. So they're like, you know what?
They still double down. It's like,
right.
Like the racists are saying, let's stop the rape.
Well, because the rape is superior.
And the left is saying, you guys are racist for wanting to stop rape. What the hell is wrong?
Right. And the people are like, racism or stop rape? Well, the racism probably.
Like, I guess I'm racist now. All things considered,
right. And so a lot of people are just like, well, the racism is really not so bad. We can kind of live with that. What we can't live with is being raped all the damn time. So and I think that's basically what's happening in Europe is that the only people willing to stand up and just say in public that, okay, this population of people that you're just bringing in droves into the country are doing us harm are racist. And are they racist? Yes. Yes, they are. Is that a good thing? No. But the only people trying to stop the damage those people are doing are racist. And unfortunately, the country is saying, we'll take the stopping the rapes and the damage that they're doing over stopping the racism. So if the left wants to claim that racism is bad, they are the fuel for it. They're causing this,
Yeah, well, and I keep going back to the German history on things.
Right.
But the reason, so you often hear Ben Shapiro sometimes talk about it on his podcast when he's trying to make an example through history, the brown church versus the black church, the Nazis versus the communists, all the brawling that was happening in the streets. The fact is that the Nazis were able to do something very effective in the media, and that was to make the communists look like the greater enemy. And as humans, this phrase has a lot of truth to it, though I don't live by it. It has a lot of truth to it when it comes to human nature, and that is the enemy of my enemy is my friend. So if you can convince yourself that the person who is if someone can convince you that, let's say, X is a greater threat and this person is Y, then you will side with Y to take care of the threat, which is X. So the problem was people were willing to...
Anyway, but Donald Trump is the best example of that right now.
Well, yeah, a lot of principled conservatives voted for Donald Trump because the greater threat was they perceived was Hillary Clinton. So what you're seeing right now is with this spike of neo-Nazism in modern day Europe, the neo-Nazis and the racists are, as you said very well, they are really the biggest proponents of these people are coming in, they're not assimilating to the culture, they're raping a bunch of people. And that in and of itself, that statement in and of itself, that there's disproportionate rape rates in this community, that there is a disproportionate lack of assimilation in this community, that is not racist. So when the left comes out and calls, yeah, exactly. So when the left comes out and says those particular statements were racist, well, then all of a sudden that word loses all of its meaning. So then when the Nazis come out and say after those two statements, and the reason they can't assimilate fundamentally is because of their race, that is a racist as hell statement. But because the word racist has been desensitized, no one bats an eye. Right. No one bats an eye. Yes.
And so the left doesn't figure out that racism thrives because of them. The reality is that, first of all,
they're the real racists.
I would know.
To you guys' earlier point about how having kind of this perception of, well, yeah, we know what we want is kind of bad, but if we don't do this, then something worse will happen. I think that's going on both sides. I was having this conversation with a conservative friend of mine on Twitter earlier today, and it was about this article that Jack of CEO was like, this is a great read. And we'll talk about it in a second here, I mean, this article, I just talk about it now. The article was horrible. It was like almost a parody of left-wing insurrectionism. It was so bad. And it's just like, we need to follow California's example. California proves that Democrats can indeed rule the country, just fine. It's like San Francisco is a literal shithole. Like if you put on a map, if you put a color code of a map, actually a friend of mine on Twitter did this. Definitely need to follow this guy at @Ty_ATTY attorney. He actually replaced Bella, Hella Right. A great guy, really funny. He's a great replacement for it. And he puts this map, and he puts all basically a little blot, a little brown spot anywhere in San Francisco where like somebody publicly defecated, and it literally looks like someone took a wet dump on a map. It's like this little brown stain all over San Francisco, like somebody smeared poo on a map, and you're like, wow, it's a literal shithole. Like people are actually taking a dump in San Francisco. These are the people that are going to do this in the next Civil War. And they actually use, and it's terrifying because they actually use the term Civil War. Right. And then they proceed to talk about how, oh no, but it doesn't need to be, there's not going to be any violence, guys. No, we don't need to be. It's like, guys, that's not how wars are won. I don't know if you know this, but wars usually involve, bombs and shooting people and blowing things up.
I might add, let's try to remember which side of that war actually understands how guns work.
Right. Like, it doesn't get PTSD from shooting them at the range.
Like, what was the trigger? I don't understand why it won't spray bullets.
Yeah, it's so this article goes into this, and it's polemic, it's demagoguery, it's just trying to gin up this excitement about the new Civil War that we're gonna win. And all we got to do is quash the right. All we have to do is suppress the right and silence them and make sure that they don't have any political power or any ability to speak out against our rule because we know better, and California proves that we know better and that we can just run the show better. And Jack quote tweets it and says, "This is a great read," and everyone's like, "Yeah," and you wonder why people think Twitter is garbage and biased, and it's just like. And so I wrote a thread about this. You can read it on ornery_opinions about how this is my theory. I think the left is terrified. Like Trump wasn't. It wasn't just that Hillary was supposed to win. She wasn't supposed to lose to Trump. Like if she had lost to Jeb Bush, if she had lost to Ted Cruz, or pretty much anyone but Trump, okay. The left, I don't think, would be freaking out like they are. But he is representative of everything they despise, or they claim to despise, about the ugly American. Yeah. And so he wasn't supposed to beat their golden, well, I can't say child because she's older than Moses, but you get the idea.
The golden vagina.
Oh God! That's perfect.
We're gonna move past that.
Wow! I don't think I can. I think we're gonna call the show early, folks. Good God!
It's like an account of vomiting, right?
but here's the thing: the left, they're not stupid, and they're not completely morally bankrupt. They're kind of there, but I have to believe that most leftists, your average day, like Joe, your working Joe leftist, okay, the guy that gets up, puts his pants on, and goes to work, or goes to work without pants. I don't know what it's like in California. It's a little weird. But that guy isn't the guy going around saying, "Yeah, we need to have a revolution, and we need to fight the power man, and we need to figure out how to do haymakers and shoot guns because that's what they're going to do."
The last time they tried that didn't work out well.
Yeah, that guy. That's not that guy isn't saying that because he knows that if there's a war, he's screwed. It's his family that's getting in trouble. It's the lily white trust fund liberals that they grow up in their gated communities and they go to their Ivy League universities and they're never challenged and they have this morally superior view. They're the ones saying, "Yeah, no, we should have a war, and we can send brown people to fight it for us."
Not to mention, I'm sorry, I'm brought back to that video of the Antifa people trying to learn how to defend themselves. Like they had, I swear it looked like a Taibo class, you know, and then trying to shoot.
Glomar and No Slack Delta, who we've had as guests on the show, we were joking around about that. We're like, in ancient Asian cultures, it was not uncommon for warriors of one school to travel the country and then challenge like the best top student of other martial arts schools. I think we should bring back that tradition.
Right? Yeah, good luck.
Just to see how it works out. Be like, guys, let me show you some holes in
it's a good weeding process, you know. That way, the people who with the shitty, shitty styles of Taibo is not self-defense. I'm trying to get people to understand that right now.
Here's the thing. Here's the thing. Leftists know they're being oppressive. Leftists know that they're suppressing people's rights. Some people try to convince themselves that they're not doing it, but I have to think that deep down, the reason why they're trying to convince themselves that they're not doing that is because they know they're doing it and it's wrong. And the reason why they're doing that is because they honestly believe that if someone like Trump is in power, if someone like me or John or Eric like has a say, then the whole world goes to hell in a handbasket. And it's like, I mean, how do you, I don't understand how you hold that belief, but I do think you bring up an interesting point. Like both sides convince themselves that the other side is the greater of two evils, and we have to embrace the lesser of two evils. And that's the danger, I think, of the lesser of two evils mentality.
Mm-hmm. Well, so the problem that it actually kind of worries me a little bit, all of the pro-Civil War rhetoric that I've seen from both a few figures on the left and right. I mean, what worries me more though than the Civil War rhetoric is something that I think a lot of pundits, particularly more on the right, because it's happening more to the right, have pointed out, which is there's a problem in this company, or not company, within this country with attributing motive. And the problem with attributing motive specifically is sometimes you can attribute a good motive to someone, but usually when you're attributing a motive, that you're attributing a negative motive. And what happens on the left, and it's really started to happen on the right as well, as tribalism has really risen within the right, is we both attribute the absolute worst motives to each other. Like the left says that the right, the reason they want this policy is they want to suppress the black vote. The reason they want these pro-gun policies is so people can murder as many children as possible, so these gun nuts can kill people. And then the right comes out and not specifically call you out, but they say that I think that the left is proposing these free speech policies, or they're more favorable toward them because they want to oppress people, because they don't want these people to have their say. They're worried about these people having their say.
But are we wrong, really?
But that's the thing. They're saying that. They're actually saying that. They're saying we don't want the right to be able to speak. We don't want people on the right to have any political power. I agree with what you're saying as far as like, yes, both sides attribute the very worst to each other. Yeah. And it's one thing to say, for example, if you're on the right, to say, well, you're just a Marxist, you're just an evil, commie-loving Marxist who wants to give away free shit to everyone. Like, okay, that's attributing the worst to people. But when and this is actually something that I wrote in the thread, was you have to treat the left exactly like we want to treat ISIS. And by that, I mean, if ISIS comes out and says, we want to wage jihad, we want to kill the infidel, we want to kill your women and children, or rape them, or enslave them, we want to kill your men and behead them. Like, we don't turn around and say, you guys are funny. Like, you almost got me there.
We're trying to come together.
Like, we don't say that, but we do that with the left. When the left says verbatim, like, we want a civil war, we want to silence the right, we want to kill them, punch them, we want to punch a Nazi, where Nazi is code for anyone that's not. Communist. Nazi is code for anyone who has who's registered as a Republican.
But dude, it's not even anyone right. Look at Dave Rubin. Dave Rubin is hardly a right-leaning guy. Yet he's a Nazi all of a sudden. But it's
when they say things like that, at some point you have to take them seriously. At some point you have to say,
Right.
Okay, these guys actually want to silence us. These guys actually want to put us out of business. These guys actually want treat us like second-class citizens.
And again, this is true with Amendments 1 and 2 of the Bill of Rights. Again, we're being expected to believe that they don't mean what we obviously hear that they mean. The Second Amendment, they're saying, again, how many signs at the March for Our Lives was said, "We are coming for your guns"? Michael Ian Black sitting on, coming for our guns. Look, can't we take it?
At some point, we have to take them seriously. I'm not saying we attribute the worst to them and say you're evil, scummy people. I think I'm giving them benefit of the doubt when I say, look, they have these views and they think they have to do this to protect from a worse fate, which is evil fascist Nazis taking over the country. But that's the best case scenario, is that they're afraid and they're acting out of irrational fear. The worst case scenario is they're actually fucking evil.
So here's the thing. There's a difference, and I think you kind of just brought it up there. There's a difference between attributing motive and seeing the justifiably seeing the action that they want to take. So if you look at the March for Our Lives, for example, yes, you can look at all those signs, you can hear the responses from the crowd, and you can say, you know what, a majority of these people, they want to take our guns away. That isn't attributing motive. That's just saying that I see the actions you want to take. Attributing motive is attributing a reason for why they want to take the guns. So what you often hear from a lot of people on the right is, not pundits particularly, but more the masses, is they want to take our guns away so they can disarm the populace and wage a tyranny. No. The reason they want to take guns away is because they think it's going to save lives, because they think that self-preservation, the right to self-preservation, should be more enforced. It's kind of a weird paradoxical argument, but they believe it should be more enforced by the state, that the state can better protect you than you can protect yourself. Now, I don't agree with that. I think it's a terrible argument. I think it's logically flawed, and I will argue against it. But I'm not going to go up to that person and say, you just want to instate a tyranny. And the same goes with particularly some speech laws and some speech issues. And I think the best case with this is the gay cake trial, where these Christian bakers wouldn't make a gay person their cake. Now, I'm not going to talk about the specific motives of the people in that trial, like the specific gay people taking this trial. I don't know. I'm not a mind reader, but I can say that a lot of people on the left who are advocating that these Christian bakers be forced to make a particular cake, it's because they're going in the line of anti-discrimination laws, and they see this as a civil rights issue. They don't see this as a religious rights issue. They're not doing it because they want to deconstruct. And again, I think this is a big thing on the left, that they want to institute more of a secular society. But I don't think this particular issue has to do with deconstructing the traditionalist society or promoting the gay agenda. From a lot of people on the left who I've talked to, who I've heard from, they genuinely see it as an issue of civil rights. So the problem is when you attribute a motive to these people that they just genuinely want to silence the right because they think the right is going to plunge the nation into chaos. No, it's because they think they are protecting other people's rights, specifically with some of these issues that we see. They think they're saving lives. They think they're protecting people. They think they're bettering society. You have to come at it from the realm, or like with immigration, when they say they want to legalize all DACA recipients before dealing with the border. How you deal with that is you go and say, listen, I understand that you're coming at this from an altruistic perspective. That altruistic perspective may be keeping people in the country, saving lives, whatever. But you have to understand that despite what you think this does, it doesn't do that. And your altruism is actually one of the most merciless things you can do. You have to show them that their altruism is not actually altruism. It hurts society. It hurts individuals. I found that to be the best way to convince some of them. I have convinced people using that line of argument. So I don't know. I don't like all this attributing motive of this side wants tyranny, this side wants to suppress minorities, blah 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 blah. You know,
I think you bring up a good point too. Like a lot of times it's not even so. Like going back to the cake example, right? I wouldn't even say it's that they don't think it's a religious rights issue. They recognize the religious rights, but they put priority over anti-discrimination. So there is this tension between rights, right? Mm-hmm. We have religious rights, we have property rights, we have all kinds of things that we recognize as a society are rights. The problem is when do these rights clash? Right? Yeah. How do we prioritize? And that's kind of the big debate, right? That's where the left and the right kind of talk past each other, because the right will say no, but they have a religious right, they have property rights, they have a right to say, you know, I'm not going to participate in this.
Well,
this
also,
is my bakery.
There's again, this is also an issue with the left. I find is a problem of definitions of things. They say they don't want tyranny, but they also don't know what tyranny means. The problem is that they say it's like with the Second Amendment. Okay, the easy example is like, we don't want to ban guns. Okay, what do you want? Well, we want to ban all semi-automatic weapons.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's
so you want to ban guns. Okay.
So do they want to ban guns? No, but what they do want does that. So the thing is
right.
that
that goes to Eric's point. Like,
right.
when you're discussed, and I think also, you know, Eric, you brought up a great point about debate, and I think there's a difference between a debate and a discussion. Like right now, what we're having is a discussion. Like that's
exactly.
You know, we're having a little back and forth, but you can persuade me, I can persuade you, John. Same, you know. There's no need. There's no adversarialness here. There's no combativeness here, right? We're debating we're discussing what we believe, and we're trying to reach an understanding. But at the end of the day, when this show is over, we'll each have learned something, and we'll maybe have modified our views or refined them somehow. Whereas in a debate, the goal is to prove that your opponent is either an idiot or a liar and shouldn't be listened to, so that your audience will listen to you. And you're supposed to do it in the most like elegant way possible, so they don't think you're a complete asshole while you do it.
Yeah.
But what I find interesting is that we're having these discussions, we're not having these discussions with liberals. We're having these "ha got you" debates, and then it turns into a massive pissing contest. And
exactly.
And there's a really good article. I'll have to look it up. I'll post it in the on our account. But if Google moral intuitions, conservatives versus liberals, it was in an issue of Psychology, I believe, I want to say, or Social Justice something or another. I'll have to look it up. It's a social justice magazine. It's an academic magazine. I think it was Psychology Today. I read it in college years ago, and it completely altered my view on the whole left-wing dichotomy. What it discovered, it's an actual academic study that did some polls. And what it did with these polls is it discovered that liberals and conservatives, people who identify politically as liberal or conservative in America, actually have completely different intuitions. And specifically, liberals have two main intuitions. The first is, I'm doing this off the cuff, so forgive me if I get this wrong. But the first, I believe, is reciprocity. So in other words, the golden rule: do unto others as you would have done unto you. And harm. So don't hurt other people, right? Those are the only two governing moral intuitions, primarily amongst liberals and the left. When you look at conservatives, they have those two moral intuitions, but on top of those two, they have three others. They have respect for authority, conforming to the in-group and getting along, versus autonomy, as well as chastity and virtue and purity.
Yeah.
And what they found is that our understanding of harm and our understanding of reciprocity was exactly like the liberals. But the difference was liberals only valued those two moral intuitions, where we value these other moral intuitions, and we are always trying to balance them. And what's interesting about that is you look at conservatives internally during, like, for example, primaries. Then you find that conservative groups, within conservative groups, we value each of those five intuitions very differently. Libertarians value autonomy and breaking away from the in-group far more than they value, for example, chastity or virtue or purity, or respecting authority. Conservatives value more respecting authority and reciprocity. So it's just this interesting dynamic. And I think a lot of the clashing that we're finding is not that the motives are bad, or not that we don't value certain rights or certain things. There are people that don't, and they will tell you. There are a lot of people that will say, you don't have a right to own a gun. There are a lot of people that say, you don't have a right to free speech. You don't have a right to discriminate. And you can't reason with those people because they don't accept the fundamental premise that your rights exist. But there are other people who say, well, yeah, you do have a right to free speech. Yeah, you do have a religious right, but you also have a duty to not discriminate. You also have a duty to not. And this will actually be really good because I know, you know, you and I talked about having you back on the show another time. And this is actually really good segue into that discussion about natural rights versus natural law, because that is the foundation of the country, right? And we often conflate the two. We think that natural law and natural rights are synonymous. They're not. They're actually very, very different. So we're going to have you back on the show because I actually want to have that discussion. I think that's something
I do too.
As Americans, we really need to like discuss. What is natural law? What are natural rights? Why is our country based on them? How do they tie to the Declaration? How do they tie to the Constitution? Because I think that's where we're talking past each other, not just conservatives versus liberals, but even conservatives versus other conservatives. We're using the language of the rights and natural law and rule of law, but we're not understanding, one, what we mean by that, and two, what the other side understands when we say that. And so there's a lot of miscommunication going on. So I'll let you have the final. Go ahead, John.
Well, I'll just say the one thing, which is just that the problem I have with the left. If you go back to like the Federalists and Anti-Federalists, they vehemently disagreed on a lot of things. They shared something basic that we don't share with the left today, which is the idea that, you know, again, the reason the Federalists and Anti-Federalists argued was because they all agreed that the government should not have a certain degree of authority over the people. But, you know, they quibbled on the details beyond that. But the problem is today we don't share that basic understanding that the left is excising even liberals. Again, the reason why the term classical liberal is becoming popular again is because liberals
aren't liberal.
True liberalism is rejected by the left. The left is literally shaving down to a very minimal number who can qualify. You have to goose step along with them. If you don't, even if you consider yourself a leftist, there was a video on YouTube in the last 2 days. Lindsay Shepard, if you remember the Wilfrid Laurier incident, that she's saying, I'm no longer a leftist. Dave Rubin, who thought he was a leftist, is saying, you know, said long ago, I can't consider myself a leftist. Why? Because the left is excising. From the center to the left, we have that coalition that the Federalists and Anti-Federalists had, that we may not agree with each other, but we all agree on one thing, which is that people have the right to speak. You have the right to have your opinion. You have the right to, you know, speak that opinion, and that I have, you know, that sort of thing. The left does not believe in that. And that's where we have the problem. I think that's where the free speech problem exists, is that, that we don't share that basic understanding that people are allowed to dissent from what you believe. People have the right to be offensive. They have the right to offend me. The left does not believe that as a general rule. And I think that's why we have a problem today. Is for that.
And that's why I started mentioning earlier about the whole argument, like about the First Amendment not protecting you from corporations or not protecting you from private business decisions, which is technically true, but you're violating a higher principle. Like, it's the founders didn't think that free speech was only good, or let me how do I want to say this? They did not think that censorship was only bad when the government did it. They recognized that no, there's the rights to conscience, right? There's freedom of conscience, and you have to be able to express yourself and express your opinions without fear of being attacked, without fear of being destroyed. And the government can't pass laws that let you be destroyed, and they can't pass laws that will destroy you. But it's just because the First Amendment only restricts the government doesn't mean we shouldn't enact culturally and legally protections against free speech. because we should be able to express ourselves. We should be able to say what we feel and what we think without fear of repercussion. There's this tension there. Eric, I'm going to let you have the final word, and then we'll go ahead and close out here.
Well, I think the main disconnect, I think there's two disconnects here, and one of them was going to be the original topic, but then the Kevin Williamson thing came up, and it was like, it was too big. But
it's just a very ADD show.
Yeah, I think there's two disconnects. One is that we don't understand where rights come from, and not but I mean, like, a lot of society doesn't understand where rights come from. And you know this because when you hear a leftist sometimes argue against certain free speech values or against certain self-preservation values, they say that, well, the Constitution gives us the right to freedom of speech. It can be taken away. No, that's not what the Constitution is for. The Constitution was founded out of a fundamental belief that you in a state of nature are endowed to a certain level of rights, have certain rights, and the Constitution was enshrined in order to protect those rights, in order to say that the government is going to protect these negative rights from other people and occasionally from itself. So it's a problem of people thinking that rights come from government and not from God, and that humans don't have these rights in a state of nature. That's one of the major disconnects. And the other major disconnect is positive versus negative rights. A lot of people put positive rights on the same ground as negative rights. And that's not to say all positive rights are bad. It's just to say that, for example, for the people who don't know out there, basically a negative right is a right that you have without government infringement, which is basically like the government has no right to come in and say that I cannot say X. I have a negative right to free speech. It's a right that I have where the government leaves me alone. While a positive right is more attributed to civil rights, where the government comes in and enforces something to give you the right to something. So positive rights endow government action and negative rights don't. And negative rights as a whole are far more valuable than positive rights. Now, of course, there are certain positive rights that are good, where the government has to come in and do something for an oppressed class, or you know what I mean, where it's something like fraud is occurring. But at the end of the day, the conflation between positive and negative rights and the lack of understanding of where rights come from are where the real boundaries are within the broader right and the broader left. And it's something that we need to overcome if we're going to have a proper society.
All right. Well, that was a really great conversation. I'm glad we're having you on. That's a great leading off point, because I do want to have you back on sometime in the near future, because I think we should pick this up. I think we should have this conversation about natural law and natural rights, because that's fundamental to understand. If you don't, and you're absolutely right, if you don't understand where rights come from, if you don't believe in the Declaration in terms of what it says and substantively, then there's no conversation to be had. It's impossible to persuade someone who doesn't have at least some kind of common ground to build on. So definitely going to have you back. Eric, where can people find you if they want to see more insightful thoughts from you?
Well, I have a Twitter, the best Twitter account ever. At Real Eric Shaffer, Shaffer. And then you can also follow my podcast, which I'll be posting an episode on Sunday, called The Shaffer Hour, again, Shaffer, and you can find that on Podbean or the Apple Podcast app.
It's a great podcast. I'm a big fan. So
thank you.
Really happy to have Eric on the show here today. And definitely follow him. Definitely follow John and myself at Kemuri Hideyoku. Don't ask me to spell it. I'm gonna make John change it one of these days. And make sure you follow us both at ornery_opinions, where we just like to piss people off and be right all the time. We'll be here next week. We're actually going to be discussing the genocide and the violence that's going on in South Africa. So hopefully you tune in. And thanks again for watching the show, guys. Make sure you share and subscribe. And great conversation, by the way, in the live chat. So I don't know if these show up in the recordings, but if they do, definitely take the time to read through it. There's some really great comments here from Graywolf76, Andrew Donaldson, and Mark 81150. So thanks again, guys, for your participation. Thanks for the great comments, Eric, and we'll see you guys next week.
Thanks for having me on, man.